The sky above Violia was a soft swirl of pink and gold, as if the planet itself were brushing its face with gentle light. Small floating orbs of energy drifted lazily between the massive, twisting trees that towered over the land. Lyra had never seen anything like it. In all her 12 cycles, she had wandered the forests, explored the crystal-clear rivers, and marveled at the strange luminescent flowers that opened only at twilight. But today, something new appeared in the sky, something huge and unfamiliar that made her heart beat faster. Lyra had been tending to the low-growing berry bushes near the edge of the forest when she noticed a glint of metal reflecting the sunlight. She froze. Slowly, a strange silver object descended from the sky, making a soft hum that did not disturb the leaves or the small creatures that scurried nearby. Her antennae twitched nervously. The object was unlike any flying thing she had ever seen. Birds, yes. Insect sailors that glided on the air currents, yes. But this was solid, enormous, and moving with purpose. As the object came closer, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then it landed in a clearing, making a gentle thud that vibrated through the ground. Lyra could barely believe her eyes. From the hatch of the craft, a group of beings began to step out. They were tall, impossibly tall, and their bodies moved with a strength and grace she had never imagined. They had pale skin that shone faintly in the sun, and they carried small devices that beeped and hummed, scanning the environment. Lyra's legs trembled and she whispered to herself, "Human, it's too big." Her words were barely audible, but in the stillness of the forest, they carried far. She had never thought of anything being too big before. Her species had always built their homes and tools to exact scales. Everything was carefully measured. Nothing existed that could overpower a dozen adults. But these humans, they seemed to fill the world just by standing in it. Curiosity overcame her fear. She crept closer, hiding behind a large fern that swayed lazily in the wind. From this vantage point, she could see the humans examining their surroundings. They were not threatening. One human bent down to pick up a small rock, turning it over in their hand, studying it with quiet wonder. Another laughed softly, a sound that seemed warm and friendly, unlike the metallic chirps and clicks she was used to hearing from visitors to the planet. Lyra's eyes widened as the humans moved further into the forest. They stepped carefully over roots and branches that would have tripped many of her smaller friends. With each step, they seemed to carry their own weight effortlessly, as though the ground itself had agreed to bear them. She was torn between running back to the village to tell the elders and staying to watch. The pull of curiosity was stronger. Lyra crept silently, staying low in the ferns and underbrush. The humans' voices drifted through the air, soft and melodic but strange. They spoke in a language that Lyra could not understand, yet there was something comforting in the cadence, something that seemed almost familiar. As the humans approached a grove of luminescent flowers, Lyra saw one of them kneel down. They extended a hand toward a flower, not touching it harshly but allowing their presence to be known. The flower shivered lightly in the glow of the setting sun, and Lyra felt a strange stirring in her chest. These creatures were enormous, yes, but their care for the small things was remarkable. Lyra noticed another human gently holding a small creature, a tiny winged insect that glimmered with the same soft light as the flowers. The human smiled at it, whispering words she couldn't hear, and the creature didn't run. It stayed there as if it trusted this giant being completely. Lyra blinked. Trust. Something she knew well in her own life, but she had never seen it given across such a gap in size and strength. Her curiosity finally overcame her caution. She stepped out from behind the fern, revealing herself. She expected the humans to react with surprise or alarm. Instead, one of them turned, smiled gently, and waved. Their hand was enormous, but there was nothing threatening about it. Lyra froze. Her small wings fluttered nervously, and she felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. but the human crouched down to her level, their eyes kind and bright. They didn't try to grab her or force her closer. Instead, they simply stayed where they were, giving her the choice to approach. Something inside Lyra relaxed. Slowly, she stepped forward. The human extended a small device, a tool of some kind, and made a sound that was more gesture than word. Lyra tilted her head. The device glowed faintly and showed a simple holographic image of a tree, one that looked remarkably like the one near which they stood. Lyra laughed softly. This was strange but fascinating. She reached out her small hand and touched the glowing image. The human nodded and made another sound, pointing at the actual tree. Lyra understood. They were communicating. Slowly, carefully, she began to mimic the gestures the human made, pointing at objects, touching the glowing images, trying to match the movements. It was awkward at first. Her small fingers struggled to match the human's motions. She knocked over a tiny rock, and the human laughed softly, not mockingly, but with warmth. Lyra found herself laughing as well, the tension in her chest easing with each sound. The sun continued to dip lower in the sky, painting the forest in deeper shades of gold and orange. Lyra's curiosity grew bolder. She motioned to the humans to follow her. To her surprise, they did. Their steps were careful, considerate, but they moved with such ease that Lyra felt almost protective of her small forest paths. They reached a narrow stream where the water ran clear and cold. The humans crouched at its edge, examining the fish that darted beneath the surface. Lyra noticed one human gently cup the water in their large hands, letting it flow slowly between their fingers before returning it to the stream. The fish didn't scatter. Lyra gasped softly. They respect it, she whispered to herself. One human turned and looked at her, tilting their head. Lyra realized they understood her thought. They nodded slowly, smiling again. It was a small gesture, but it made Lyra's heart swell. These humans, enormous, strange, and startling, were not just physically big. Their hearts were big too. Lyra led them further into the forest, showing them plants and creatures that few of her people had seen. The humans marveled at each discovery, their eyes wide and gleaming with excitement. Lyra found herself explaining with gestures, chirps, and motions, discovering that the humans learned quickly. They didn't just observe, they noticed patterns, small details, things Lyra had never thought to point out. By the time the twin moons began to rise, casting soft blue light across the forest, Lyra realized that she had spent the entire day with these towering beings. She had learned their faces, the sound of their voices, the rhythm of their movements. And somehow, in that brief time, she felt a connection that went beyond size, language, or even species. As the humans prepared to return to their craft, Lyra felt a pang of sadness. She had seen something incredible today, not just the humans themselves, but what they represented. Strength and gentleness could coexist. Curiosity could lead to understanding. And perhaps, just perhaps, her small world could expand in ways she had never imagined. One human knelt before her, making a gesture she had come to understand as a kind of farewell. Lyra waved, her small hand trembling slightly, and whispered, "Human too big." The human smiled once more, then turned and walked back toward the craft. Lyra watched them go, feeling a mix of awe and excitement. The sky was dark now, but the forest seemed brighter than ever. She could still see the glimmer of their devices in the distance, and she knew, somehow, that this was only the beginning. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt that the universe was bigger than her small forest, bigger than the carefully measured structures of her people. And she couldn't wait to explore it, not alone, but with the giants who had appeared from the sky and shown her that size was not just measured in body, but in heart, mind, and spirit. Lyra turned back toward the village, her antennae quivering with excitement. She had so many stories to tell, so many wonders to describe. But she also knew that the humans were still here, still learning, still watching, still too big. And that thought made her laugh softly to herself. Under the twin moons, in the quiet forest that had suddenly become a much larger place than she had ever imagined. The next morning, the forest of Violia glowed with a soft light that seemed to come from the ground itself. Tiny flowers opened in unison, releasing gentle puffs of sparkling pollen. Lyra woke early, her heart racing with anticipation. The humans had stayed in a small clearing near the edge of the trees, and she could see the silver of their craft glinting in the sunlight. They were already moving about, examining the forest floor and touching the glowing plants with careful interest. Lyra approached quietly, keeping her distance at first. She did not want to startle them. Yet, as soon as they saw her, one human waved and smiled. Their hand was large, but it moved slowly and gently, a gesture that reassured her. Lyra's antennae twitched with excitement. Today, she would show them even more. The hidden parts of the forest that no one had dared explore, the streams that glowed at the bottom of deep ravines, and the flowers that sang faint melodies when the wind passed over them. The humans followed her willingly. They moved slowly, aware of the delicate ecosystem around them, careful not to step on the small plants or disturb the tiny animals that scurried under the leaves. Lyra was impressed. She had expected them to be clumsy or heavy, as most outsiders were, but they seemed to float across the forest floor with surprising grace. Their size had seemed intimidating at first, but now she realized it was balanced with care and patience. As they walked, Lyra began to explain in her small gestures and chirps the unique properties of the plants. She demonstrated how some flowers closed when touched too roughly, while others would hum softly when the wind brushed over their petals. The humans watched closely, occasionally pointing at the plants and making sounds that Lyra had started to understand. It was a strange kind of communication, but it worked. At one point, Lyra led them to a tall cliff that overlooked a deep valley filled with twisting rivers and glowing mushrooms. The humans stopped at the edge, peering down with wide eyes. One of them knelt, tracing patterns in the dirt with a finger, trying to understand the flow of water and the growth of the mushrooms. Lyra watched with fascination. These giants were not only observing, they were learning, and they were doing so with patience and thoughtfulness. She realized that the human size, which had seemed overwhelming at first, allowed them to do things her species could only dream of. They could reach high branches without tools, lift heavy stones with ease, and move quickly across obstacles that would take Lyra and her friends hours to navigate. Yet, despite their strength, they never acted carelessly. Every movement was deliberate, as if they understood the importance of balance between themselves and the forest. Lyra decided it was time to show them something extraordinary. She led them to a hidden grove where the largest luminescent tree on the planet stood. Its trunk was wider than any building in her village, and its branches stretched toward the sky like fingers of light. Tiny glowing creatures flitted among the leaves, and the air was filled with a soft, musical hum. Lyra's antennae quivered as she approached it. This tree was sacred and few had ever seen it up close. The humans approached respectfully, kneeling at the base of the tree. One of them reached out, their massive hand hovering just above the bark, careful not to touch it too harshly. Lyra watched in awe. They seemed to sense the tree's delicate nature, adjusting their position and their movements as if they were part of the grove themselves. Lyra realized then that these humans were not just physically large. They were capable of understanding and respecting things far beyond their own size. Their curiosity was matched with patience, and their strength was tempered with gentleness. It was a combination she had never seen before. Suddenly, a problem appeared. One of the smaller branches, weighed down by the glowing fruits that grew on it, began to bend dangerously toward the ground. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The branch was too high for her to reach safely, and if it fell, it could crush the delicate plants below. She hesitated, unsure of what to do. Without hesitation, one human stepped forward. They reached up, their large hands carefully supporting the branch. It bent under their touch but did not break. Another human came closer, lifting the heavier part of the branch with ease, and together they held it in place until the smaller creatures and plants below were safe. Lyra watched, astonished. Their size, which had seemed so overwhelming before, was now being used to protect the forest instead of dominating it. After the danger passed, the humans lowered the branch gently, making sure the glowing fruits were unharmed. Lyra approached and chirped softly, her way of expressing gratitude. One human bent down, smiling warmly, and extended a hand. Lyra touched it lightly, amazed at how careful they were despite their enormous size. As the day continued, Lyra showed the humans more hidden wonders of the forest. They visited a series of underground caves filled with crystals that refracted light into countless colors, and the humans marveled, their large eyes reflecting the sparkling walls. They learned to move carefully, crouching low and using their hands to navigate the narrow passages. Lyra felt a sense of pride. She was teaching these giants, and in turn, they were teaching her about their way of seeing the world. By mid-afternoon, they reached a wide river that curved through the forest like a silver ribbon. The water was swift in some areas and calm in others, and it was home to many strange and colorful fish. Lyra pointed out the safest paths to cross, showing how to balance on the slippery stones and avoid the deeper currents. The humans followed her instructions perfectly, their large bodies moving with surprising agility. One human paused to scoop up a handful of water, letting it flow slowly between their fingers. They watched the fish swim around the moving water, fascinated. Lyra tilted her head, understanding that this was their way of studying the environment. She realized that their large size allowed them to interact with multiple parts of the ecosystem at once. They could lift rocks to check for insects, reach high branches to examine fruit, and even hold animals carefully in their hands without harming them. As the sun began to set, the forest was bathed in warm orange and purple hues. Lyra led the humans to a small clearing where her friends from the village had gathered, curious to see the newcomers. At first, there was hesitation. The villagers were wary of humans, not just because of their size but because of the unknown. But Lyra stepped forward, chirping and gesturing for them to come closer. The humans knelt, making themselves smaller, and smiled gently. They did not reach for anyone, nor did they act aggressively. The villagers watched carefully as the humans extended their hands slowly, showing they meant no harm. One by one, Lyra's friends approached, tentatively touching the humans' hands or arms. The humans laughed softly, not in mockery but with warmth, and soon the villagers were smiling and chirping back. It was a moment of connection that transcended size, language, and species. Lyra felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had been right, these humans were enormous, yes, but their hearts were just as big. They could learn, adapt, and connect in ways her species had never seen from outsiders. That night the humans set up small lanterns around the clearing, casting soft light across the forest floor. They shared stories through gestures and sounds, and Lyra listened, fascinated. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the feelings: excitement, curiosity, kindness. The humans had their own way of thinking, but it was clear that they valued the same things she did: discovery, respect, and friendship. Lyra felt a sense of wonder she had never experienced before. The humans were enormous, and their size had seemed intimidating at first. But now she realized that their size allowed them to help, protect, and explore in ways her species could not. They were not just big in body, they were big in thought, big in curiosity, and big in heart. As she lay down to rest, Lyra thought about the day's events. The humans had shown her that differences were not something to fear, but something to embrace. They had worked together with her, learned from her, and respected the forest in ways she had never imagined possible. And she knew that tomorrow would bring more discoveries. She could feel it in her chest, a mixture of excitement and anticipation. The humans were here to stay for a while, and the forest of Violia would never be the same again. Lyra drifted to sleep under the glowing branches of the sacred tree, her mind alive with visions of exploration, learning, and friendship. The humans' laughter and gentle movements echoed in her thoughts, a reminder that sometimes the biggest things in life were not the ones you could measure with your eyes, but the ones you could feel in your heart. For the first time, Lyra realized that being small did not mean being weak, and being big did not mean being powerful in the wrong way. Together, humans and aliens could discover things that neither species could achieve alone. And that realization, more than anything else, made her proud to be part of this incredible, expanding world. The morning sun rose over the forest of Violia, casting gentle light across the towering trees and sparkling streams. Lyra awoke with a sense of excitement that she could not contain. Today, she would show the humans the most important place in her village, the Great Observatory, a structure of delicate glass and crystal that had been built by generations of her people. It was a place of knowledge, discovery, and pride, and only the most trusted members of the village were allowed inside. Lyra's heart beat faster as she approached the humans. They were already awake, stretching and preparing their small devices for the day. One of them turned toward her and smiled, their large eyes bright with curiosity. Lyra chirped excitedly, motioning for them to follow. The humans nodded and adjusted their pace, careful not to move too quickly through the forest. The path to the great observatory was narrow and winding, with streams and rocks that made travel tricky. Lyra led the way, pointing out the safest spots to step and showing how to avoid the roots that snaked across the trail. The humans followed patiently, their large bodies surprisingly agile as they stepped carefully, their hands sometimes brushing against the trees to keep balance. When they reached the base of the observatory, Lyra paused. The structure was even more magnificent than she remembered. Glass panels caught the sunlight, sending rainbows across the forest floor. Crystal spires reached toward the sky, reflecting the soft light of the twin moons above. Lyra's antennae twitched nervously. The human size had never seemed so intimidating. They would have to be very careful to enter without damaging anything. The humans looked up at the observatory with wide eyes. One of them knelt and placed a hand lightly on the base of the structure, as if feeling its energy. Lyra realized that they understood the delicacy of the place, and her fear began to ease. She chirped softly, signaling them to follow her inside. The interior of the observatory was even more fragile than the outside. Crystalline staircases spiraled upward, and glass floors allowed a view of the gardens below. Instruments for studying the stars and plants were scattered throughout, each one carefully placed and calibrated. Lyra led the humans carefully, showing them where to step and how to move without disturbing anything. As they explored, Lyra noticed a problem. One of the central supports of the observatory, a tall crystal column, had begun to crack. The weight of the upper floors was causing the delicate structure to bend dangerously. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. If the column collapsed, it could destroy the entire observatory. She chirped urgently, pointing at the crack, but the humans did not understand immediately. One human knelt and studied the column, running a hand along its smooth surface. Their eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Lyra realized that they were considering how to solve the problem. She gestured again, showing the size of the crack and the risk it posed. The human nodded slowly, then looked at their companions. Together, they began to plan. Lyra watched in amazement as the humans worked. They used their large hands to support the weakened column, holding it steady while Lyra and her friends inspected the damage. They lifted heavy pieces of the structure that her small arms could not move, while Lyra showed them where to place delicate supports to prevent further cracks. The humans moved with surprising gentleness, careful not to break anything. Time passed, and the work grew more complicated. The observatory's upper floors needed adjustments, but they were far above Lyra's reach. One human extended their long arms upward, holding tools and materials while another carefully guided the placement. Lyra's friends passed smaller pieces to the humans, who handled them with extraordinary precision despite their size. The teamwork was remarkable. Lyra realized that this was the true strength of the humans, not just their size, but their ability to combine power with care, thoughtfulness, and cooperation. Each action was measured, each movement deliberate. They were solving a problem that no single being could have managed alone. As the day went on, the humans and aliens worked together tirelessly. Lyra directed the placement of fragile glass panels, showing how to balance them against the wind and weight of the upper floors. The humans lifted enormous pieces that had seemed impossible to move and held them steady, while Lyra and her friends secured them in place. At one point, a small piece of the crystal floor began to wobble. Lyra gasped, knowing it could shatter easily. One human quickly placed a hand under the panel, steadying it, while another adjusted the supports beneath. Lyra's friends worked alongside them, carefully tightening connections and ensuring the structure remained stable. By afternoon, the crack in the central column had been reinforced, and the observatory stood secure once more. Lyra stepped back, her antennae quivering with relief and pride. The humans had saved the most important place in the village, not with force, but with intelligence, patience, and careful strength. The humans turned to Lyra and her friends, their large faces filled with quiet satisfaction. They gestured to the repaired observatory, and Lyra chirped softly in response. She realized that this was more than just fixing a structure. It was a demonstration of what could happen when species worked together, combining different strengths for a common goal. Lyra led the humans to the upper floors of the observatory. From there, they could see the entire forest, the rivers twisting like silver ribbons and the distant mountains glowing in the sunlight. The view was breathtaking. The humans knelt and looked out over the landscape, their large eyes filled with wonder. Lyra's heart swelled. She had shared her world with them, and they had respected and protected it in return. As they watched, Lyra noticed a small group of her friends pointing toward the sky. Tiny shapes were moving among the clouds, birds, insects, and floating energy orbs. The humans followed their gaze and smiled. They were as fascinated by the creatures of the air as they were by the forest and the observatory. Lyra realized that their curiosity was boundless, and that they would continue to learn from her and her people for as long as they stayed. The day grew late, and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, dotted with the first stars of evening. Lyra led the humans back to the clearing near the edge of the forest, where lanterns glowed softly. The villagers had prepared a small celebration, placing glowing flowers and fruits in intricate patterns on the ground. They were not sure how to express their gratitude, but Lyra knew that the humans would understand through their gestures and actions. The humans knelt in the center of the clearing, carefully examining the arrangement. They moved slowly, touching the flowers lightly, and seemed to appreciate the care and creativity that had gone into the display. Lyra chirped happily, encouraging her friends to interact. Slowly, the villagers began to relax, realizing that these enormous beings meant no harm and were capable of understanding beauty and effort, even if their size made everything seem overwhelming. As night fell, the humans shared a moment of quiet reflection with Lyra. One of them knelt, placing a large hand gently on the ground, feeling the energy of the forest and the village. Another pointed toward the stars, tracing constellations with a finger that seemed enormous compared to Lyra's small hands. They did not speak in words she could understand, but their actions communicated a deep sense of respect and wonder. Lyra felt a connection she had never experienced before. These humans were physically vast, yes, but they had hearts and minds that could reach far beyond their size. They could understand, protect, and create in ways that inspired her. She realized that their presence on Violia was not just a curiosity, It was a gift. They brought new ideas, new perspectives, and a new way of seeing the world that complemented her own people's knowledge. As the night deepened, Lyra climbed a small hill near the clearing to watch the humans settle for rest. They arranged their devices carefully, creating a soft glow that illuminated the forest around them. Lyra's antennae twitched with happiness. The forest felt alive in a new way, full of promise and discovery. She thought about the days they had spent together, the exploration, the laughter, the learning, and the teamwork. The humans had shown her that size was not a limitation but a potential, and that true strength came from understanding, patience, and collaboration. Lyra realized that the phrase she had whispered when she first saw them, "Human, it's too big," had been only half true. They were big in body, yes, but also in spirit, heart, and mind. Lyra smiled to herself, knowing that the future of Violia had changed forever. The humans would remain, learning from her people and teaching in return. Together, they could explore the wonders of the planet, solve problems that neither species could solve alone, and create a bond that would endure for generations. As she settled down under the glow of the twin moons, Lyra felt a sense of peace and excitement. The forest was quiet, the air filled with the soft hum of life, and the humans slept nearby, their breathing steady and calm. She knew that tomorrow would bring new adventures, new discoveries, and new lessons. But for now, she allowed herself to rest, filled with gratitude and awe. The humans had arrived as strangers, too big and unfamiliar, but they had proven themselves worthy of friendship, trust, and admiration. And Lyra understood that this was the essence of being human, not just strength, but curiosity, kindness, and the courage to act gently in a vast and fragile world. Lyra closed her eyes and drifted to sleep, the forest of Violia shimmering softly around her. The humans would awaken to another day of wonder, and together, they would continue to explore, protect, and celebrate the beauty of a world that had suddenly become much larger than any of them had imagined. And in that moment, Lyra realized that sometimes the biggest things in life were not measured in size at all, but in the ability to care, to learn, and to grow together.